What happens when one of the most beloved women in country music sits down across from one of the sharpest tongues on daytime television, and neither one of them is willing to back down? Because what went down between Reba McEntire and Joy Behar on The View was not the kind of polite, rehearsed back and forth you usually see when a celebrity comes on to promote something. This was not a friendly interview that hit a small bump. This was a full collision, live on national television, in front of a studio audience that had absolutely no idea what they were about to witness. And the reason it escalated the way it did, the reason Reba said what she said and did not take it back, is something that gets more interesting the deeper you look at it. Before we get into exactly how this went down, if you are new here, subscribe right now, because this channel is where we break down the moments that people are still talking about long after they happened. Drop a comment and tell us, did Reba go too far, or did she have every right to say what she said? We want to know where you stand. Now let us get into it. Reba McEntire came onto The View as a guest who, by any reasonable measure, had nothing to prove. Decades into a career that has survived every shift in the music industry, a television career, a Broadway career, and more reinventions than most artists even attempt. She walked into that studio as someone who had earned her seat at any table she chose to sit at. The expectation from everyone in that room, from the producers, from the other hosts, and almost certainly from Reba herself, was that this would be a conversation. A good one, maybe, a spirited one, possibly, but a conversation. Joy Behar had other ideas. It did not start with a confrontation. It rarely does, when things get genuinely heated. It started the way most of these things do, with pleasantries, with the audience applause fading into the kind of easy, back and forth that fills the first few minutes of any talk show segment. The hosts welcomed Reba warmly. There was laughter. There was the kind of energy in the room that suggests everyone is glad to be there. And Reba, who has been doing interviews for longer than some of the people in that audience have been alive, was relaxed and sharp and funny in the way she always is when she is comfortable. But Joy Behar, from almost the very beginning of the actual interview, had a specific direction she wanted to push the conversation, and she was not particularly subtle about it. It started with a question about Reba's public statements on community and values, the kind of broad topic that can go in any number of directions depending on how it is asked. Joy framed it in a way that was pointed from the start. Not aggressive, not yet, but pointed. The kind of framing that is designed to put a guest in a position where any answer they give can be immediately challenged. Reba answered honestly and directly, the way she tends to do. She talked about where she comes from, about the values she was raised with, about the way she sees the relationship between what she believes personally and how she moves through a public life. It was a thoughtful answer. It was not a vague, press-trained no. It was specific, and it was personal, and under normal circumstances it would have moved the conversation forward. Joy did not let it move forward. Instead, she came back with a follow-up that reframed what Reba had just said in a way that Reba visibly did not appreciate. Not because it was inaccurate exactly, but because it took what Reba had said in one context and placed it inside a different context, one that carried different implications, and then asked Reba to defend the reframed version rather than what she had actually said. Reba paused, and anyone who has watched enough interviews, who understands what it looks like when someone is deciding between the polite response and the honest one, could see exactly what was happening in that pause. She chose the honest one. "I think you just changed what I said," Reba told her, and she said it the way that only someone who has been doing this for decades can, without raising her voice, without flinching, with a kind of calm that somehow made the words land harder than if she had been visibly upset. "I want to go back to what I actually said, because I think it matters." The audience reacted, not with the kind of scripted applause that happens on cue, but with the kind of spontaneous sound that comes from a room full of people who just felt something shift. Joy did not back down either. She acknowledged the pushback with a slight smile, the kind that suggests she was not entirely surprised by it, and then she pressed again. She said that she was not changing what Reba said. She was asking Reba to consider how it might be interpreted by people who did not share the same background or the same frame of reference. She framed it as a question about perspective, about whether Reba had thought about how her words land outside of her own community. It was a reasonable enough framing on the surface, but Reba heard something in it that she was not willing to let go unchallenged. "I think there is a difference," Reba said, "between asking me to consider someone else's perspective, which I am always willing to do, and asking me to be embarrassed about my own. And I am getting a little bit of the second one right now." The audience responded again, louder this time. One of the other hosts shifted in her seat, and Joy Behar, for just a moment, looked at Reba McEntire with an expression that was hard to read, somewhere between appreciation and the recognition that this particular guest was not going to be moved the way she might have expected. What happened next is where this interview became something different, entirely. Because Joy leaned forward, and she asked the question that, once it was out in the room, made it impossible for the conversation to stay on the surface. She asked Reba directly about the people who feel that someone with Reba's platform and Reba's influence has a responsibility to use that platform more explicitly, to speak more directly to issues that matter, and whether Reba's choice to stay in what Joy called a more neutral lane was a choice she made out of genuine conviction, or out of a desire to protect her audience and her brand. It was a sharp question. It was also, depending on how you look at it, a fair one. But the way it was delivered, the specific phrase Joy used, protect her brand, landed in the room like something thrown rather than something asked. Reba straightened, and what came next was not what anyone in that studio had prepared for. Reba did not raise her voice. That is the thing that people who were in that studio keep coming back to when they describe what happened next. She did not raise her voice. She did not look to the other hosts for support. She did not laugh it off or deflect with a joke the way guests sometimes do. When they want to release pressure without creating more of it, she did none of those things. She sat completely still, and she looked at Joy Behar, and she spoke with the kind of deliberate, measured clarity that is somehow more unsettling than anger. I want to make sure I understand what you just asked me, Reba said, because I think you just suggested that the reason I live my life the way I live it, the reason I say what I say and don't say what I don't say, is because I am worried about my bottom line. And I have to tell you, Joy, that is one of the most dismissive things anyone has ever said to me in an interview. And I have done a lot of interviews. The studio went quiet in the way that studios rarely go quiet. Not the polite quiet of an audience waiting for a punchline, but the genuine, slightly uncomfortable quiet of a room full of people who are not sure what is about to happen and do not want to miss it. Joy held her ground. She said she was not trying to be dismissive, she was trying to be direct, and that she thought Reba was someone who could handle directness. She said that the question of whether public figures use their platforms responsibly was one she asked everyone who came on that show, not just Reba, and that she did not think it was an unfair question. And here is where the conversation became genuinely fascinating, because Reba did not dispute that. She did not say the question was unfair. What she said was something more specific and more pointed than a simple objection to the question itself. The question is not the problem, Reba said. The way you framed it is the problem. You did not ask me whether I feel a responsibility to use my platform. You told me that staying in a neutral lane is something I chose in order to protect my brand. You already decided why I do what I do before I had a chance to tell you, and then you dressed it up as a question. Joy opened her mouth to respond, and Reba kept going, not loudly, not aggressively, but with the kind of forward momentum that makes it clear a person is not finished and knows exactly where they are headed. I have been in this business for a very long time. I grew up without much. I worked for everything I have, and the values I carry with me are not a marketing strategy. They are who I am. And when someone sits across from me and implies that my character is a business decision, I think I have every right to say something about that. So I am saying something about it. One of the other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, leaned slightly forward at that point, and the audience responded with a sustained wave of applause that the producers clearly had not anticipated, because it went on longer than the show's rhythm usually allows for. Joy waited for it to settle, and to her credit, she did not look rattled. She looked like a woman who had just heard something she was genuinely turning over in her mind. When the applause faded, Joy said something that surprised a lot of people who were watching. She did not double down. She did not apologize exactly, but she said, I hear what you are saying about the framing. I think the framing was probably sharper than it needed to be. She paused, but I still think the underlying question is worth asking. And Reba, rather than taking the partial concession as an exit ramp, stayed exactly where she was. Then ask it, Reba said. Ask me the real question, because I will answer it. I am not afraid of the question. I just want it to be the actual question and not a version of it that already has my answer built in. Joy looked at her for a moment, and then she asked it, plainly, without the editorial framing that had started the whole exchange. She asked Reba whether she believed that artists and public figures with large platforms have a responsibility to weigh in on the major social and political issues of their time, or whether she believed that staying out of those conversations was equally valid as a choice. It was a cleaner question, and Reba answered it with the same directness she had been bringing to the whole conversation. I think every person, famous or not, has to decide for themselves how they engage with the world, Reba said. I think there are people who speak out loudly and people who work quietly, and I do not think one is more honorable than the other. I think it depends on what is in your heart and whether you are actually doing something or just performing something. And I will tell you honestly, I have seen a lot of performing from all kinds of people, and I do not have a lot of patience for it. Joy caught the edge in that last part. Are you saying that some of the people who speak out are performing rather than actually committed to what they say? I am saying, Reba replied, that talking about something and doing something about it are not the same thing. And sometimes the loudest voices in a room are the ones doing the least. And I am also saying that some of the people who never make a speech or post anything or go on a talk show and declare their values are the people quietly changing lives in their communities. I know which one I would rather be. The room was with her. You could feel it. Not in a way that was hostile to Joy, because Joy was not playing a villain in this. She was doing her job and she was doing it well. But in the way that audiences respond when they feel like someone is telling the truth at a level that cuts through the usual noise of these conversations. Joy pressed one more time. She asked whether Reba thought it was possible that her approach, the quiet approach, was easier, whether it allowed her to benefit from the progress other people made by being loud, while keeping her own hands clean. It was the sharpest thing Joy had said in the whole conversation, and it landed visibly, not because it wounded Reba, but because Reba recognized it for what it was. The real argument underneath everything Joy had been building toward since the beginning of the interview. Reba looked at her steadily. The audience was completely still. That, Reba said, is a fair point, and I respect you for saying it straight. But here is my answer, and what came out of Reba's mouth next is the moment that everyone who watched that interview is still talking about. I have never kept my hands clean, Reba said. I have just kept my mouth shut about it. And there is a difference. She did not wait for Joy to respond. She kept going, and the room let her, because there are moments in a live broadcast where even the producers stop thinking about the clock. I grew up poor in Oklahoma. Not television poor, not storytelling poor. Actually poor, in everything I have ever done with what I have built, the people I have hired, the communities I have invested in, the causes I have supported. I have done without a camera on me and without a press release. Not because I am ashamed of it, because that is not why I do it. The minute you start doing good things so that people will see you doing good things, you have changed what the thing is. You have made it about you, and I was raised to believe that it is not supposed to be about you. Joy was listening, genuinely listening, which is not always a given on a show that moves as fast as The View does. Now, Reba continued, you want to ask me whether I benefit from progress that other people made by being loud. Absolutely I do. Everybody does. I am not going to sit here and pretend I built everything I have in a vacuum with no one else's sacrifice underneath it. That would be a lie, and I do not deal in lies. But I will also say this. The people who marched, the people who organized, the people who stood in front of cameras and took the heat. They were not doing it so that someone like me would owe them a public statement. They were doing it because they believed in something. And the best way I know how to honor that is to actually live by it, not to perform it. Joy leaned forward. But Reba, when you have the kind of reach you have, when millions of people are listening to you, does the private approach actually move anything? Or does it only feel meaningful to you personally while the public conversation keeps happening without your voice in it? It was a good question. The kind of question that does not have a clean answer, and Joy knew it. She was not trying to embarrass Reba at this point. Something in the conversation had shifted. This had stopped being a gotcha and started being a real argument. Between two people who actually disagreed about something that mattered. Reba absorbed it. She did not rush her response. I think you are asking whether silence is complicity, Reba said, and I think that is genuinely one of the hardest questions anyone can wrestle with. I do not have a perfect answer. I do not think anyone does. What I can tell you is that I think the standard you are describing, where every person with a platform is obligated to perform their values publicly or be accused of protecting themselves, that standard doesn't actually produce more good in the world. It produces more noise, and sometimes the noise drowns out the people who are actually doing the work. But you are not just anyone with a platform, Joy said. You are Reba McEntire. People in communities that do not listen to politicians, that do not watch news programs, they listen to you. Does that not come with a specific kind of responsibility? Reba looked at her, and something in her expression shifted. Not softened exactly, but opened up, like she was deciding to give Joy something real rather than something polished. Yes, she said, it does, and I feel that every single day. I feel the weight of it. I know who is in my audience. I know where they come from. I come from the same place. And because I know them, I also know that the fastest way to lose them, the fastest way to lose any chance of reaching them, is to walk in like I have all the answers and they need to catch up. That is not how you reach people you love. That is how you lecture people you have already written off. The audience responded to that. Not with applause, exactly, but with that particular kind of collective exhale that means something has hit a nerve. Joy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, and this was perhaps the most surprising thing she said in the entire interview, I actually think I understand what you mean. I do not know that I agree with the conclusion, but I understand the reasoning. Reba looked at her with what can only be described as genuine appreciation. That is all I have ever asked for, she said. I am not asking you to agree with me. I am asking you to not put words in my mouth and then ask me to defend them. Give me the real question, and I will give you the real answer every single time. And if I give you a question you genuinely cannot answer, Joy asked, and there was a slight smile on her face now, the first real warmth between them since the interview had turned sharp. Reba smiled back. Then I will tell you, I cannot answer it. I have been doing this long enough to know the difference between a question I do not want to answer and a question I do not have an answer to. I try not to confuse the two. There was genuine laughter in the room then. Not the relieved laughter of tension breaking, but the warmer laughter of two people who have been through something together and come out the other side with more respect for each other than they had going in. But Joy was not quite finished, because Joy Behar is never quite finished. Last question, Joy said, and I mean this sincerely. After everything we have just talked about, after this whole conversation, do you think you will change anything about how you use your platform going forward? Or do you feel like you have defended a position you are going to stay in? Reba was still for a moment. The room was with her. I think, she said slowly, that this conversation has given me something to think about. And I mean that genuinely, not as a way of ending the interview politely. I think you pushed me in a way that I needed to be pushed, even if I did not love the way it started. And I think I pushed back in a way that maybe you needed to. That is what a real conversation is supposed to do. Make both people think, not just the one sitting in the guest chair. Joy looked at her. Fair enough, she said. And Reba nodded once. Fair enough. The audience applause that followed was long, and it was not for one of them. It was for both of them. For two women who walked into a room with different ideas, refused to back down from any of it, and somehow managed to get somewhere real by the end of it. That is the interview. That is what happened. And the reason people are still talking about it is not because someone was humiliated or someone won. It is because it was real. In a media landscape full of managed moments and rehearsed responses and questions, designed to produce the answer the host already wants. What happened between Reba McEntire and Joy Behar was something that has become genuinely rare, to people who actually meant what they said. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think Reba was right that private action is more powerful than public performance? Or do you think Joy had a point that someone with Reba's platform has an obligation to use it out loud? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because this is exactly the kind of conversation worth having. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button, because this channel is where we break down the moments that cut through the noise and actually mean something. We will see you in the next one.